The night Olivia Brennan disappeared, the air in northern Vermont smelled like rain and burnt marshmallows. It was July 17th, 1999, and Camp Whispering Pines sat nestled between two mountains, far enough from civilization that cell phone towers were still a distant dream. The camp had been around since 1962, weathering decades of summers with the same creaky cabins, the same squeaky screen doors, and the same faded wooden signs pointing toward the lake. Nothing ever really changed at Whispering Pines. That was part of its charm, parents said. A place where kids could be kids, where technology did not intrude, where innocence still meant something. Until that night. Olivia was 14 years old. Brown hair that caught the sunlight in copper streaks, freckles across her nose, a gap between her front teeth that made her smile look younger than her years. She was quiet, the kind of girl who brought books to camp and read by flashlight after lights out. And her cabin mates called her bookworm, but not unkindly. She had two best friends at camp, Jenny Hollis and Rebecca Tate, both returning campers like herself. And they had been coming to Whispering Pines together since they were 10. The three girls shared cabin 7, along with 5 other campers and their counselor, a college sophomore named Amanda Price. Amanda was 20, studying elementary education at the University of Vermont, working her 3rd summer at the camp. She kept a journal, wrote letters to her boyfriend back home, and took her responsibilities seriously. Too seriously, some said later. Because when Olivia vanished, Amanda was the last person who claimed to have seen her. The evening began normally enough. Dinner in the mess hall, sloppy joes and corn on the cob, followed by the usual campfire gathering near the lake. 240 campers, ages 8 to 16, gathered around the flames while camp director Walter Finch told ghost stories. He always did on Saturday nights. The stories were traditional camp fare, nothing too frightening, just enough to make the younger kids squeal and huddle closer together. Olivia sat between Jenny and Rebecca, roasting marshmallows, her face glowing orange in the firelight. Several counselors would later tell police they remembered seeing her there, laughing when Walter Finch made the obligatory scary voice, but shrieking along with everyone else when he clapped his hands for the jump scare. She was there. She was absolutely, definitely there. At 9:30, Walter dismissed the campers back to their cabins. Lights out was at 10. The path from the lake to the cabin area wound through a stretch of pine trees, lit by solar-powered lanterns hung from branches. Not bright, but sufficient. The campers moved in clusters, giggling and shoving, still buzzing with sugar and adrenaline. Amanda did a head count when cabin 7 arrived back at their bunks. 8 girls. Everyone accounted for. She made them brush their teeth, change into pajamas, settle into their sleeping bags. She read them a chapter from Holes, which was the popular book that summer, and then turned off the overhead light at exactly 10:05. Her flashlight clicked off 3 minutes later. At 2:17 in the morning, Jenny Hollis woke up needing to use the bathroom. The camp had outhouses, old wooden structures positioned between every 3 cabins. Jenny grabbed her flashlight, slipped on her sneakers, and pushed through the screen door as quietly as possible. Amanda was asleep in her bunk near the door, her breathing deep and steady. Jenny did not want to wake her. She knew the way. When she came back 4 minutes later, she noticed something odd. Olivia's bunk was empty. At first, Jenny assumed Olivia had also gone to the bathroom, maybe passed her on the path without realizing it in the dark. She climbed back into her sleeping bag and waited. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15. The screen door never creaked. No footsteps on the wooden porch. Nothing. Jenny sat up, whispering into the darkness. "Olivia?" No answer. She grabbed her flashlight again and shined it across the cabin. 7 sleeping bags. 7 girls breathing softly in the summer heat. Olivia's bunk was still empty, her sleeping bag unzipped and pushed aside, her flashlight missing from the small shelf beside her pillow. Jenny shook Rebecca awake. The 2 girls whispered urgently, then crept toward Amanda's bunk and gently touched her shoulder. Amanda woke slowly, confused, then alarmed. She pulled on her shoes and stepped outside, calling Olivia's name in a harsh whisper, not wanting to wake the entire camp but growing increasingly frantic. No response. Just crickets and the distant sound of the lake lapping against the shore. Amanda ran to the nearest counselor cabin and woke up 2 other staff members. Within 10 minutes, they had searched the outhouses, the mess hall, the arts and crafts building. They checked the dock, terrified they might find Olivia floating face down in the black water. Nothing. At 2:53, Amanda knocked on the door of Walter Finch's private cabin near the camp entrance. By 3:15, every counselor and staff member at Camp Whispering Pines was awake and searching. They used flashlights, lanterns, anything they could find. They called Olivia's name until their voices turned hoarse. They woke the campers and did head counts in every single cabin, praying she had somehow wandered into the wrong bunk in a sleepy haze. She had not. Then, at 4:32, as the sky began to lighten from black to deep blue, Walter Finch made the phone call no camp director ever wants to make. He dialed 911 from his office, his hands shaking so badly he misdialed twice. The Vermont State Police arrived at Camp Whispering Pines at 6:11 that morning. Detective Louis Graves was assigned as lead investigator. He was 46 years old, a 20-year veteran of the force, a man who had worked missing children cases before and hated every single one. He arrived with 3 other officers and immediately established a command post in the mess hall. The parents were called. Panic spread like wildfire through the phone lines. Some families arrived at the camp within hours, demanding answers, demanding their own children back. By noon, more than 60 officers and volunteers were combing the woods surrounding the camp. The Bloodhounds were brought in, following Olivia's scent from cabin 7 to the outhouse, then to the edge of the tree line near the eastern boundary of the property. There the trail went cold, not gradually, abruptly, as if Olivia had simply ceased to exist at that exact spot. Detective Graves interviewed every camper, every counselor, every staff member. He spoke to the cooks, the maintenance crew, the nurse. He asked about Olivia's behavior in the days leading up to her disappearance. Had she seemed upset? Scared? Had she mentioned wanting to run away? The answers were universally the same. Olivia was happy, normal. She loved camp. She had been looking forward to the talent show scheduled for the following weekend. Jenny and Rebecca were interviewed separately, and their stories matched perfectly. They had gone to bed with Olivia in her bunk. When Jenny woke at 2:17, Olivia was gone. Neither girl had heard anything unusual. No voices, no footsteps, no struggle. And the cabin's screen door was not locked, but it squeaked loudly whenever it opened. Jenny insisted she would have heard it. Amanda Price was questioned extensively. But Detective Graves knew statistically that when a child disappeared, the adults closest to them warranted the most scrutiny. But Amanda's alibi was solid. She had been asleep in the cabin the entire night. The other girls confirmed it. She had no motive, no prior incidents, nothing in her background that raised red flags. She was devastated, sobbing through the entire interview, blaming herself for not waking up. But Walter Finch was equally cooperative. He provided personnel files for every staff member, allowed police to search every building on the property, opened his records going back 5 years. Nothing. No predators, no suspicious hires, no prior complaints. The search continued for 11 days. Helicopters flew overhead, using thermal imaging to scan the dense forest. Dive teams searched the lake, dragging the bottom in grids. Volunteers walked shoulder to shoulder through the woods, looking for any sign of Olivia, any scrap of clothing, any clue. The media descended on the small town of Whitfield, Vermont, turning the tragedy into a national story. Olivia's school photo appeared on every news channel. Her parents, David and Catherine Brennan, gave tearful press conferences, begging whoever had taken their daughter to bring her home. But no ransom demand came. No body was found. No witnesses emerged. On July 28th, 11 days after Olivia disappeared, the Vermont State Police officially classified the case as a suspected abduction. Detective Graves held a press conference and stated bluntly that he believed Olivia had been taken by someone, though he would not speculate on whether that person was connected to the camp or was an outsider. Camp Whispering Pines closed immediately, never to reopen. The property was sold 2 years later to a private buyer who let it rot into the forest. The Brennan family never recovered. Catherine Brennan stopped sleeping, stopped eating, became a ghost in her own home. David threw himself into the search, hiring private investigators, appearing on talk shows, creating tip lines. Nothing worked. Years passed. Tips dried up. Media attention faded. Olivia Brennan became another name on a long list of missing children, a cold case file gathering dust in a basement archive. But some people never forgot. Jenny Hollis and Rebecca Tate stayed in touch after that summer, bonded by trauma and guilt neither could shake. They attended therapy together, compared nightmares, promised each other they would never stop wondering what happened to Olivia. In 2010, when they were both 25 years old, they made a pact to return to the site of Camp Whispering Pines on the anniversary of Olivia's disappearance. They would remember her. They would keep her story alive. And they did. Every year, without fail, Jenny and Rebecca drove to the abandoned camp and stood where Cabin 7 once stood. They lit candles. They left flowers. They talked about Olivia as if she might still be listening. In 2018, 19 years after Olivia vanished, Rebecca got married and moved to Oregon. The tradition paused. Life intervened, as it always does. But Jenny could not let it go. On July 17, 2019, she drove to Camp Whispering Pines alone. 20 years. 2 decades since her best friend disappeared in the middle of the night without a sound. The camp was unrecognizable. The cabins had collapsed, reclaimed by moss and rot. The mess hall was a skeleton of beams and broken windows. The dock had washed away in a storm years earlier. But the place still felt wrong and heavy. Haunted, maybe, though Jenny did not believe in ghosts. She stood where Cabin 7 had been, now just a patch of uneven ground covered in pine needles, and cried. She cried for Olivia, for the girl who never got to grow up, never got to graduate high school or fall in love or have a family of her own. She cried for herself, for the guilt that still woke her up at night, whispering that she should have done something, should have known something was wrong. And then she heard voices. At first Jenny thought she was imagining it. The forest played tricks sometimes, wind through the trees sounding like whispers. But no, these were real voices, young voices, coming from the direction of the lake. Jenny walked toward the sound, her heart pounding. She emerged from the trees and saw them. A group of teenagers, maybe 6 or 7 of them, sitting around a small campfire on the shore. They had backpacks and tents, clearly on some kind of camping trip. They were laughing, passing around a bag of chips, looking like every group of kids who had ever spent a summer night in the woods. Jenny hesitated. She did not want to intrude, did not want to explain why a 34-year-old woman was wandering alone through an abandoned camp. But something pulled her forward. Maybe loneliness. Maybe the need to hear human voices in this cursed place. One of the teenagers noticed her first, a tall boy with shaggy hair, but he raised a hand in greeting, friendly enough. "Hey, you lost?" Jenny shook her head. "No, I used to come here. A long time ago." The kids exchanged glances, intrigued. One of the girls, maybe 16, with dark braids and sharp eyes, gestured to an empty spot by the fire. "Sit down if you want." "We were just telling stories." Jenny sat. She did not know why, she just did. The girl with braids smiled. "You want to hear a scary one? My grandma told me this story about this place. About Camp Whispering Pines." Jenny's blood turned cold. The girl continued, oblivious to the effect her words were having. "So, like 1,000,000 years ago, there was this girl who disappeared from here. Middle of the night, nobody heard anything, she just vanished. They never found her. But my grandma said people who camp here sometimes see her, walking through the trees, looking for something." Jenny's voice came out hoarse. "What was her name?" The girl frowned, thinking. "I don't remember. Something normal. Like Emily? No, wait. Olivia. Yeah, that was it. Olivia." Jenny's hands clenched into fists. She forced herself to breathe. What else did your grandma say? Oh, just that it was super creepy. Nobody knows what happened. Some people think she ran away, but like, where would she even go? We are in the middle of nowhere. Others think someone took her, but they searched forever and never found anything. My grandma thinks it was something else. Like what? Jenny's voice was barely a whisper. Well, the girl leaned in, her eyes glinting in the firelight. She thinks Olivia saw something she wasn't supposed to see. And whoever wanted to keep it secret made sure she never told anyone. The other teenagers murmured appreciatively. One boy laughed nervously. That's messed up. But the girl was not done. And the weirdest part. My grandma said that the summer Olivia disappeared, there were other weird things happening at the camp. Stuff people didn't talk about because they didn't want to scare the parents. But the counselors knew. They all knew. Knew what? Jenny's heart was racing. The girl shrugged. I don't know. She wouldn't tell me. Said it was not her story to tell. But she said if I ever came here I should be careful. Because some secrets don't stay buried. Jenny stood abruptly. The teenagers stared at her, startled. She tried to smile, tried to pretend everything was fine. I have to go. Thanks for letting me sit. She walked quickly back toward the parking area, her mind spinning. Other weird things. The counselors knew. What did that mean? What had happened at Camp Whispering Pines that summer that nobody ever talked about? Jenny sat in her car for 20 minutes, staring at her phone. Then she called Rebecca. Rebecca answered on the third ring, her voice thick with sleep. Jenny? What time is it? I need to talk to you. About Olivia. About the camp. Night turns. Mount. There was a long pause. Becca, I think we missed something. I think everyone missed something. Another pause. Then Rebecca's voice, suddenly sharp and awake. I will call you back in 10 minutes. Jenny waited. Her phone buzzed exactly 8 minutes later. Rebecca's voice was tight. I just talked to someone. Someone who was there that summer. Then a counselor. Not Amanda, someone else. She never talked to the police because she left camp 2 days before Olivia disappeared. But she just told me something. What? What? There was a maintenance worker at the camp. Older guy, lived in a trailer on the property. The counselors called him Willie. He was always around, always watching. Some of the girls complained about him. Said he made them uncomfortable. But Walter Finch didn't do anything about it. Just told the counselors to keep the campers away from him. Jenny's stomach dropped. Why didn't anyone tell the police? Rebecca's voice was bitter. Because by the time the police showed up, Willie was gone. He left the same night Olivia disappeared, packed up his trailer and drove off. Nobody thought to mention it because Walter told everyone Willie had quit a few days earlier. But that was a lie. Willie was there that night. Jenny closed her eyes. What was his full name? Rebecca hesitated. I don't know. The counselor I talked to only knew him as Willie. But she said he had a limp, walked with a cane, and he drove a blue pickup truck, old and rusty. Jenny's hands were shaking. We need to find him. I know, I'm already looking. And just like that, after 20 years of silence, the case of Olivia Brennan was no longer cold. Because somewhere out there, a man named Willie knew what happened the night a 14-year-old girl vanished from Cabin 7. And Jenny Hollis and Rebecca Tate were going to find him. No matter what it took. The search for Willie began with a single phone call to Detective Louise Graves. Jenny made it from her car, still parked at the edge of what used to be Camp Whispering Pines, her hands trembling as she scrolled through her contacts. She had kept Graves' number all these years, updated it twice when he changed agencies, never quite able to delete it. He was retired now, living in Burlington, but he answered on the second ring. His voice was older, rougher. Hollis. That you? Yes, I found something. About Olivia. There was a long silence. Then a heavy sigh. You should not be doing this to yourself. There was a maintenance worker at the camp, someone named Willie. He left the night Olivia disappeared. Did you know about him? Another pause, longer this time. Jenny could hear papers rustling, a door closing. When Graves spoke again, his voice was different. Careful. Where did you hear that name? From a counselor who was there. She said he made the girls uncomfortable. She said Walter Finch covered for him. Graves was quiet for so long Jenny thought the call had dropped. Then, almost reluctantly, he spoke. Get to my house. Bring your friend Rebecca if she is available. And do not talk to anyone else about this. Not yet. Not yet. Not yet. Jenny drove to Burlington in a daze, calling Rebecca on the way. Rebecca booked a flight from Oregon that night, arriving in Vermont by morning. They met at Graves' house at 9:30 the next day, a small ranch-style home with a garden out front and a porch swing that creaked in the wind. Graves looked older than Jenny remembered. His hair was completely gray now, his face lined with decades of difficult cases. But his eyes were still sharp, still haunted by the ones he never solved. He led them inside without a word, gesturing to a dining room table covered in file folders and photographs. Sit, Mary zit, Mason and Ponizag sat. They sat. Graves poured 3 cups of coffee, set them down, and then pulled out a folder labeled Brennan, Olivia. Supplemental. He opened it carefully, as if the papers inside might crumble at his touch. William Cutter. That was his full name. 52 years old in 1999. He had been working at Camp Whispering Pines for 3 summers, hired by Walter Finch as general maintenance and groundskeeper. He lived in a trailer on the northeast corner of the property, away from the cabins. He had a record. Jenny's heart stopped. What kind of record? Graves pulled out a faded photocopy of a police report. Assault, 1987. He got into a fight at a bar in Montpelier, put a man in the hospital, served 18 months. Before that, there was a restraining order filed by an ex-girlfriend in 1984. She claimed he followed her, showed up at her work, wouldn't leave her alone. No charges filed, but it was documented. Rebecca leaned forward. So why was he working at a summer camp with children? Because Walter Finch was desperate. The camp was struggling financially. He could not afford to be picky about who he hired. Cutter worked cheap, kept to himself, and did the job. Finch figured as long as he stayed away from the kids, it would be fine. But he did not stay away, Jenny said quietly. Graves shook his head. No, I interviewed a total of 18 counselors after Olivia disappeared. 4 of them mentioned Cutter in passing. Said he gave them the creeps. Said he watched the girls when they swam in the lake, lingered too long near the cabins during evening activities. But none of them reported it formally because Finch had already told them Cutter was harmless, just a little odd. And they trusted Finch. They should not have. But why didn't this come out during the investigation? Rebecca's voice was rising. Why didn't you arrest him? Because by the time I got to the camp, Cutter was gone. And Finch told me he had quit 3 days before Olivia disappeared. He said Cutter had a family emergency, packed up and left, no forwarding address. I had no reason not to believe him. The time frame did not match. If Cutter left before Olivia vanished, he could not have been involved. But he lied, Jenny said. Finch lied. Graves nodded slowly. I know that now. I didn't know it then. 2 months after the case went cold, I got an anonymous call. No name, no callback number. The voice said I should look into William Cutter. Said he was still at the camp the night Olivia disappeared. Said Finch lied to protect the camp's reputation. By the time I got a warrant to search Finch's records, the original employment files had been destroyed. Fire in the camp office. Convenient. Too convenient. And too convenient. Did you find Cutter? Graves rubbed his face. I tried. I spent 6 months tracking him. His trailer was registered in New Hampshire, but he had not renewed the registration. His driver's license had expired. No bank accounts, no credit cards, no tax returns. He vanished as completely as Olivia did. I put out bulletins in 6 states. Nothing. It was like he knew someone would come looking and made sure he could not be found. Rebecca's voice was barely above a whisper. You think he took her? I think he is the only person who makes sense. Graves pulled out a map of Camp Whispering Pines, yellowed with age. He pointed to a spot on the eastern edge. Cutter's trailer was here, less than 200 yards from Cabin 7. The Bloodhounds tracked Olivia's scent to this area before losing it. At the time, I thought maybe she ran into the woods and got lost. But if Cutter had a vehicle parked near his trailer, he could have grabbed her, put her in the truck, and driven away before anyone woke up. The dogs would not have been able to follow the scent beyond that point. Jenny felt sick. So she is dead. Graves met her eyes. Probably, yes. But without a body, without evidence, I could not prove it. And after 20 years, the chances of finding either are almost zero. Almost, Rebecca said, but not impossible. But Graves smiled grimly. No, not impossible. Over the next 3 days, Jenny and Rebecca became amateur investigators, tearing through public records and online databases with an obsession that bordered on madness. They found William Cutter's birth certificate, his military discharge papers from 1968, his arrest records, his marriage license from 1979 and divorce decree from 1982. They found an address in Maine where he had lived briefly in the early 90s, and another in New York from the 80s. But after 1999, there was nothing. No trace, no trail. Rebecca called every William Cutter listed in New England. None of them were the right man. Jenny contacted the New Hampshire DMV, the Social Security Administration, the Veterans Affairs Office. Dead ends, all of them. On the 4th day, Jenny had an idea. What if he changed his name? Graves frowned. It is possible. But name changes are public record. We can search for them. That they did. Unsolved. It took hours, scrolling through databases of legal name changes filed in Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, Massachusetts, and New York between 1999 and 2005. And then Rebecca found it. William Joseph Cutter filed a name change petition in Rutland County, Vermont, on August 3, 1999, less than 3 weeks after Olivia disappeared. The petition was approved on September 12, 1999. His new legal name was Joseph William Brennan. Jenny stared at the screen. He used Olivia's last name. He used her actual last name. It is not exact, Graves said slowly. Brennan versus Brenner, but close enough to be deliberate. He was taunting them. Taunting her parents. Rebecca's hands were shaking. Where is he now? They searched for Joseph William Brenner. It took less than an hour. He was living in a small town called Vermont, New Hampshire, population 3,000, working as a handyman and living in a rented farmhouse on the outskirts of town. He was 73 years old now, retired, collecting Social Security under his new name. He had been hiding in plain sight for 21 years. Graves made a call to the New Hampshire State Police. Within 12 hours, a warrant was issued for Joseph William Brenner, also known as William Joseph Cutter, for suspicion of kidnapping and murder in the disappearance of Olivia Brennan. Police surrounded the farmhouse at dawn on August 2, 2020. Cutter did not resist. He opened the door when they knocked, his hands already raised, his face expressionless. He looked old, brittle, nothing like the man Jenny had imagined. But his eyes were cold, empty. Lanty, they brought him in for questioning. Detective Louise Graves came out of retirement to sit in on the interview, flanked by 2 New Hampshire detectives. Jenny and Rebecca watched from behind the glass, holding hands so tightly their knuckles turned white. The lead detective started gently. Mr. Brenner, do you know why you are here? Cutter stared at the table. I go by Joseph now. Fine. Joseph, do you know why you are here? A long pause. Then, quietly, because you found me. The detective leaned forward. Found you? Were you hiding? Cutter's mouth twitched. Something like a smile. Not hiding, just waiting. Waiting for what? For this. For someone to figure it out. It took longer than I thought. And the room went silent. Even the detective seemed stunned. Graves spoke, his voice steady. Did you take Olivia Brennan from Camp Whispering Pines on July 17th, 1999? Cutter looked up, meeting Graves' eyes for the first time. Yes. Then, what Dole? Jenny gasped behind the glass. Rebecca started to cry. Where is she? Graves asked. Cutter shook his head. That is the part you don't get to know. The detective slammed his hand on the table. Tell us where she is. No. No. Wants to. Why not? Why not? Because that is mine. That is the only thing I get to keep. You can put me in prison, you can execute me, I don't care. But you don't get her. You don't get to bring her home and have your closure and feel better. You live with not knowing, like I lived with it. Graves frowned. Lived with what? Cutter's face twisted. You think I am the monster? You think I am the only one? Walter Finch knew what I was. He knew my record, he knew the complaints, he knew I watched those girls. And he let me stay because he needed the money, because closing the camp would have ruined him. He put those children in danger every single day. And when Olivia saw me that night, when she saw what I was doing, he told me to make it go away, make the problem disappear so the camp could survive. Jenny felt like she had been punched. Rebecca grabbed her arm, steadying her. What were you doing that night? Graves asked. Cutter smiled again, that horrible empty smile, and I was stealing. From the camp office. Finch kept cash in a safe, registration fees, petty cash. I knew the combination. I had been skimming for weeks. That night I went to take more, and Olivia saw me. She woke up, she went to the bathroom, and she saw me through the window of the office with the safe open. She ran. I caught her at the tree line. And then... Cutter leaned back. And then I made a choice. I could let her go, let her tell everyone, lose my job, probably go back to prison. Or I could fix it. So I fixed it. I put her in my truck. I drove. And I made sure nobody would ever find her. Where? Graves' voice was rising. Where is she? Cutter said nothing. And the detective tried again. If you tell us, it might help your case. Show remorse. Help the family get closure. Cutter laughed, a dry, rasping sound. I don't want help. I want to watch you all suffer like I suffered. Like Finch made me suffer when he fired me after you started asking questions. He threw me away to save himself. So now you all get to live with the same thing. Not knowing, never knowing, never knowing. They questioned him for 6 more hours. He admitted to taking Olivia. He admitted to killing her. But he refused to say where her body was. He refused to give any details, just repeated, again and again, that they would never find her. William Joseph Cutter was charged with first-degree murder, kidnapping, and obstruction of justice. His trial began in March 2021. The evidence was overwhelming. His confession, his motive, his history. The jury took less than 4 hours to convict him on all counts. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. But Olivia was still missing. Walter Finch was also arrested, charged as an accessory after the fact for lying to investigators and destroying evidence. He claimed he had no idea Cutter had taken Olivia, that he only lied about Cutter's departure date to protect the camp's reputation. The jury did not believe him. He was sentenced to 12 years. Jenny and Rebecca attended every day of both trials. They sat behind Olivia's parents, who had aged into shadows of themselves, and listened to every horrific detail. And when it was over, when Cutter was led away in handcuffs, Jenny felt nothing. No relief, no closure, just emptiness. Because Olivia was still out there. Somewhere. Lunwhere. Detective Graves spent the next year organizing search efforts. He brought in cadaver dogs, ground-penetrating radar, forensic teams. They searched the woods around Camp Whispering Pines, the roads Cutter might have driven, the properties he had lived on. They found nothing. Nothing. In June 2022, Cutter died in prison. Heart attack. He was 75 years old. He never told anyone where Olivia was, and that should have been the end. But in October 2023, a hiker found something in the woods of northern Vermont, about 40 miles west of Camp Whispering Pines. A small metal box, rusted and half buried in the dirt. Inside was a diary. It belonged to Olivia Brennan, and the police analyzed it immediately. The handwriting matched samples from Olivia's school notebooks. The entries were dated from July 1999, the summer she disappeared. Most of them were typical teenage diary entries. Complaints about boring camp activities, gossip about boys, inside jokes with Jenny and Rebecca. But the final entry was different. It was dated July 16, 1999, the night before she disappeared. It read, "I saw something tonight. Something I was not supposed to see. I don't know what to do. If I tell someone, he will know it was me, but if I don't, he will keep doing it. I am scared. I wish I could talk to Mom and Dad. I wish I could go home. I am going to wait until morning and tell Amanda. She will know what to do. She has to." And that was it. The last words Olivia Brennan ever wrote. The police analyzed the diary for weeks. Forensic experts confirmed it had been buried for years, possibly decades. But there were no fingerprints, no DNA, nothing to indicate who had buried it or why. Some speculated Cutter had left it as a final taunt, a breadcrumb that led nowhere. Others thought maybe Olivia had hidden it herself before Cutter took her, a desperate attempt to leave evidence behind. Nobody knew for sure. Jenny and Rebecca read the diary together, sitting in Jenny's apartment, passing the photocopied pages back and forth. They cried. They raged. And then they made a decision. They were going to finish what Olivia started. They hired a private investigator to dig into Walter Finch's financial records from 1999. What they found was damning. Finch had been embezzling money from the camp for years, skimming registration fees, inflating expense reports, pocketing donations meant for facility upgrades. He had been bleeding the camp dry to pay off gambling debts. And Cutter had known about it. That was what Olivia saw that night. Not just Cutter stealing. Cutter and Finch working together. The evidence was circumstantial, but it was enough to reopen the investigation. Finch was called back to court, his sentence extended. He finally admitted the truth. Yes, he had known Cutter was stealing. Yes, he had told Cutter to handle it when Olivia saw them. But he claimed he never meant for Cutter to kill her. He thought Cutter would just scare her into silence. The judge did not care. Finch's new sentence was 30 years. He would die in prison. But still, Olivia was missing. In the years since, Jenny and Rebecca have continued searching. They have organized volunteer search parties, raised money for forensic technology, kept Olivia's story alive on social media and true crime podcasts. They have never given up. Because Olivia deserves to come home. On July 17, 2024, 25 years after Olivia Brennan disappeared, Jenny and Rebecca returned to Camp Whispering Pines one last time. The property had been sold again, this time to a conservation group planning to turn it into a nature preserve. The cabins were gone, bulldozed and removed. The lake was clean and still. It looked peaceful, almost beautiful. They stood where Cabin 7 used to be and planted a small memorial tree. The plaque at its base read, "Olivia Brennan, forever 14, never forgotten." And as they stood there, the wind moving through the branches above them, Jenny thought she heard something. A voice, young and familiar, carried on the breeze. "Thank you." She turned to Rebecca, tears streaming down her face. Rebecca nodded, her own eyes wet. "I did." They stayed until sunset, talking to Olivia the way they used to when they were kids, sharing stories and memories and promises. And when they finally left, walking back toward the parking area as darkness fell, Jenny felt something she had not felt in 25 years. Peace. Nansen, not closure. There would never be closure. Well, not without Olivia's body, not without answers. But peace. The knowledge that they had done everything they could. That they had fought for their friend when no one else would. That they had made sure her story would never be forgotten. And somewhere, in the vast forests of Vermont, Olivia Brennan rests. Hidden, lost. But not forgotten, never forgotten. Never forgotten. Because some stories do not end, they just wait. Wait for the right person to tell them. Wait for the right moment to be heard. And this story, the story of a girl who vanished in the night, and the friends who never stopped searching, will be told again and again, passed down like the campfire tales that started it all, until the day someone finally brings Olivia home.